Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Bailey. I'm the editor of the IHEAM monthly magazine Health Estate Journal. The title of this morning's webinar, which is being held in conjunction with HEJ, is Digitising Fire Safety Compliance in Healthcare Estates. It'll be presented by Tom Ford, Honeywell's National Business Development Manager for Connected Life Safety Services, abbreviated to CLSS, in the UK and Ireland. Honeywell says the webinar will enable attendees to be clear on the responsibilities of healthcare estates personnel in ensuring fire safety compliance, discover how the company self-tests multi-award winning technology is digitizing and automating fire system testing and maintenance, and understand how they can go beyond compliance requirements on their estate. Honeywell explains, fire systems require testing, inspection and maintenance to continue functioning effectively, with smoke detectors needing annual functional testing and inspection. However, this process can be disruptive, requiring access to every room in an estate and meticulous manual recording, which can result in inaccuracies and missed detectors. Honeywell says its groundbreaking self-test technology and connected life safety systems app are paving the way for digitizing fire system testing and maintenance, creating audit trails that allow users to prove that their subcontractor has completed a full functional test of the fire system. The company says this will help service providers and estate owners and estates teams save time on site, and it also provides real-time updates on the performance, testing, and overall compliance with local fire safety codes. For the last 2 years, today's speaker, Tom Ford, has worked with Honeywell partner companies to raise awareness of CLSS and support its development. In doing so, he's become a leading voice on software as a service within the life safety sector. A member of the Fire Detection and Alarm Council, he has a strong focus in his role on supporting the Internet of Things transformation, as Honeywell puts it, in the fire industry. I'm sure you'll find this a very interesting and informative webinar. If you have any questions as the presentation progresses, please type them into the panel on the right of your screen, and Tom will then do his best to answer as many of them as time allows at the end of his presentation. Over to you, Tom.
Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to be here. So hopefully we're all aware we're going to be focusing on digitising fire safety, specifically in healthcare estates. And as mentioned, we're going to be doing this by focusing on a couple of products offered by Honeywell, starting with CLSS and then moving on to self-testing devices. But whilst I have you here, I hope you don't mind. I want to start off with some back to basics in fire as well. And I did this a few weeks back to a group of people in Northern Ireland, and it was pretty well received. And the room, sort of the learning I took, the room was full of people who might have fire as part of their role, might have sort of wider responsibilities, sort of group health and safety managers or directors or whatever that might fall. And then fire is sort of slotted into that role. And sort of somebody said to me that it was with some fire responsibilities, it was kind of that situation where you know you should know somebody's name, but it's gone past that point and you can't ask anymore. So it leads quite nicely into some of the areas that we're going to cover as well. So if it's not relevant, don't worry, it's only a few minutes, and then we'll move on to sort of the good stuff then. So whole presentation shouldn't last much more than sort of 30 minutes or so, leaving some time for questions at the end. So let's get started on some standard stuff. We'll look then to some end user requirements, and then lastly, a little bit on third-party certification. So then, what do the standards say? We're looking at BS 5839 to begin with. I'm going to spend pretty much all my time focusing on that, really. But there is another standard that is going to become important to you in time, which is BS 8644 Part 1, and that focuses specifically on digitising fire safety. So if there is a bit of homework or a takeaway for today, is have a look into that standard, that BS 8644 Part 1, and that will sort of provide some valuable information and insight. So every building, every system is required to have a logbook. It's a physical record of all activity on the fire system. And that's outside of normal working operation. Okay, so it's a history of all weekly testing, any faults that occur, a record of all maintenance, and a log of all false alarm activations as well. So as end users, you're required to perform a weekly test of the system. It comprises of, a physical test of the system, which is done by a manual call point in the building. And over the year, all of those call points need to be tested. So not just that favorite one that's in that best location, all of those call points need to be tested. So it's also a requirement of the standard that a competent person is appointed to complete the maintenance on the system over a course of the year. So that will include all functional testing of all devices. So sensors, it will include functional testing, visual inspections, cause and effect testing, anti-mask, etc., etc. So that list goes on, but so that competent person needs to be employed to carry out that test. So what I want you to think about now really is, how do you know that your logbook is being filled out? How do you know where it is? Are you fully aware where that is? And do you know who the responsible person is for it? And do you know that it is accurate? Absolutely. Are your call points being tested weekly? And do you know again, absolutely, that they are? And if so, is it the same one being tested weekly, or are each of them in turn being tested? And then throughout your maintenance visits and inspections, are all of those requirements that we mentioned before and more being tested and carried out? Absolutely. So end user responsibility. So the user's responsibilities are, again, they are well defined, and they start with the appointment of that responsible person. So if I sort of touching over sort of the same subjects again, it's hopefully just to sort of deliver that message. But with that responsible person, you've got to ensure that the system is functioning on a daily basis, and any fault reporting is done as required. The weekly test and monthly maintenance checks need to be arranged, and records kept and carried out of work carried out. The responsible person needs to ensure that all the occupants of the building are aware of what to do in the event of an alarm. If the system has a two-stage verification procedure, it's important that staff are aware of what to do to cancel the alarm or evacuate the building, summon the fire services. So all those processes and procedures, are they being carried out the way they're written, and are they fit for purpose? And finally, and probably most importantly, is ensuring the system remains suitable during the life of the building. Okay, so the life cycle of that building. So simply put, is the building, the structure of it, is it being taken into account when any changes are being carried out on the fire detection system? Okay, so lastly, and I said this wouldn't take too long, so hopefully we've not taken up too much of your valuable time, but third-party certification schemes, and why are they important? And for me, I think they're exceptionally important in the fire industry, many industries, but in the fire industry, because they offer that neutral, agnostic confirmation that a company meets or even exceeds and works to that highest standard expected to manage and maintain something as important as a life safety system. It's only going to show you how important it is when the time comes, so you need to know it's ready for that. And in the fire safety industry and life safety, there are two main schemes that exist. Okay, so the first one is that LPS 1014 that encompasses all elements of BS 5839, from design, installation, commissioning, service, and then maintenance as well. And I think it's fair to describe that as a very robust system. The most sort of widely deployed, I guess, is BAFE. And what's great about that one is it's modular in its approach. So if a business is in its sort of fledgling period of existence, or it's sort of in the SME market and it's growing, it gives a business an opportunity to sort of take those modulars on one by one. And if it's sort of just servicing they're looking at, great. If it's installation and they're moving into commissioning, fine. And when they're ready, design. So both are exceptionally good, and they offer that level of comfort and really sort of for me, pushes the message that only third-party accredited companies should be engaged in fire detection as well. So that's where we are on the back to basics. This is a bit of sort of tongue-in-cheek. This is a bit of fun, this slide, but where are we in fire? And I would sort of probably say, unfortunately, there's many of you on this webinar today who might recognize what that arrow is pointing at. And so the fire industry is sort of sat in the sort of the circa 1995 era for many ways and many reasons, and who sort of has this attitude, isn't quite the right word, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's for really good reasons. You know, it's a very traditional industry, and people's lives are at risk. These standards have been developed for extremely good reasons by very professional and great people who've forged the way in the industry. So any change that we make needs to be done very carefully, very respectfully to a traditional industry to make sure that people's lives are you know, without the systems that we manage and maintain, are working to the highest standard. So if we're offering if we're digitizing the fire safety industry, it needs to be done right. So over there, so we're edging towards, on the end of that image, you see the cloud-based technology, and security's got loads of great stuff that's standardized, that have codes of practices already in existence. The fire industry's getting there, and with tools at your disposal like CLSS and self-test and others out there, we are edging that way, and we're doing it quite quickly as well, but it is taking some time. So with this, so we're moving over to sort of the hospital side of things now, but this is quite general. This can be moved to lots of different areas, but think of a hospital fire system. Okay, so but much like any other building, that's managed and populated with employees and general public, they're going to fall under 3 key management areas that need to be observed. So the first one is visibility and asset management. So understanding that you need visibility, knowing how everything's connected together, knowing the sort of devices and where they are, the awareness of the building changes, and budgeting for any life cycle or health associated costs need to be considered. And by health, I mean health to the devices, because it's not just age that impacts them. The second one is the event management. So how are your fire events, faults, disablements, events, cause and effect strategies managed from your perspective? Are your processes robust, and on a day-to-day basis, are they fit for purpose? And then there's management and maintenance as well. So you very likely employ a competent individual to carry this out, but you there's engineers that will carry out this test and inspect requirement, but you need to know how non-compliances are captured and how they're managed as well. And you need to understand the remedial changes and what they are and how they're taking place and what that's going to do to impact your site. Is your cause and effect testing going to be impacted with whatever you do, and how so, and how long is it going to take to fix? And knowing these things as an end user is really important too. And then lastly, back to it, where's your logbook? Is it up to date, and is it accurate? And how do you absolutely know indisputably that it's accurate? So with hospital fire systems, and I do offer some sweeping statements here, so forgive me for this, but you know, time's of the essence, and these are just a few of the sites that Honeywell's had some involvement in as well. So from our experience, my experience, most hospitals, a lot of hospitals are old. They're very complex sites, and with many buildings spread across large areas that have been added to, extended, developed over a period of time. You know, fire systems can be massive, and they're often stretching the limitations of a panel or network capabilities to accommodate the size and scale of the system as well. And much like, you know, airports perhaps are very difficult to shut the whole thing down and to replace or rip out or whatever you. It's very difficult to do that in hospitals. So over time, a lot of changes can transpire, and some are planned, some aren't. Environmental changes take place regularly on these sites, and how spaces are actually used and for what purpose can often change too, often impacting the effectiveness and ultimately the compliance of the system. So aside from brand new installs, the above fairly accurate description of some NHS sites, or a lot of NHS sites, which can have a very high impact on scheduled maintenance visits. So attaining 100% on any maintenance certificate is really difficult, and proving it is often even more difficult. It relies completely on human intervention and often falling onto the shoulders of one or two key individuals with really specific site knowledge. So hopefully that's kind of set a scene as to what I want to get onto and talk to you about, and how potentially we could help. So what we have here is two key products. The first one is where I spend a lot of my time working on, is CLSS. So we do a lot of communicating and acronyms here at Honeywell, but that stands for Connected Life Safety Services. And then moving on to self-testing detectors. So I'm going to start with CLSS. Please feel free to sort of pop some questions in the box as we go, and I'll try and get to them later on. But what is CLSS? What are the key main things for it? So at its heart, first and foremost, it's a compliance tool. So this offers indisputable data and compliance. It draws information directly from the panel and puts it into the cloud. So it reduces that human intervention. It doesn't pull its punches, and it just gives you that data, raw data. Number two, sort of maintenance data. So you get to see to the percentage point as to what stage your sites are in their annual maintenance and servicing. So think about that as a NHS building, a site, or even a trust. Seeing the percentage point of any inspection, that'd be pretty good. An end user experience, what CLSS does is it improves the end user experience. So you can manage and observe your systems really conveniently from anywhere in the world if you want to, but from your desktop. And it gives you a level of clarity that you probably don't already have at the minute. So you can see everything you need to know, so you can plan, so you can manage and support your systems from your side using this information as well. And you're all doing it from the same location as well. End user testing. So we've talked about core point testing before. So you can easily and effectively carry out your manual core point testing via the CLSS app. And with its support and the way it's managed, you won't carry out the same core point testing twice. And then you get to future-proof your business as well, which is only a good thing. So CLSS is the carrier for lots of Honeywell life safety emerging technologies as well, such as self-test and graphics. So future-proofing by using this is going to be sort of quite beneficial too. So how does it work? So what you can see here is admittedly quite basic but visual representation of a network of a fire system. Okay, so we've got a series of panels here, and connected to that panel in the top right, you can see a loop, and that loop has various different devices on. This is fairly sort of standard, so you can sort of get a grasp of what I'm talking about. So CLSS is connected via a piece of hardware called a gateway. Now that gateway taps into that panel, draws the information out, and it enables information to transfer from a local system to the cloud. So all access to it is license and permission based, so it's pretty secure. We can probably touch on this at the end, but we've got some information that we can send out as a follow-up. So as an end user, you NHS teams, you can have live and comprehensive information of the condition of your systems on a dashboard or on an app as well. So you get a very similar set of information as does your maintenance company as well. But the maintenance company using this can now potentially test and inspect, commission, respond to events far more effectively. So we're improving the relationship between you and your maintainer as well. So over to the visibility and the management of it as well. So macro and micro views, it can be really good. So again, looking at this customer, the NHS trust account, you might have an NHS trust, for example, that has 3 hospitals. Hospital 1 has 2 buildings, 2 has 3, and 3 has 4. Now you get to see using just the dashboard, and there is so much more to CLSS than a dashboard, but you get a general overview of your site. You can see all recent events. Now events are categorized in 2 ways on CLSS: your active events using your app, and some sort of more micro information on the dashboard as well. And then it kicks over post midnight into recent events, but you get this log of all your recent events. Now, if it's a fire, if there's a fire event, it'll make a real great big noise and you can respond accordingly. But if it's something a little less urgent, maybe a disablement or something like that, this can be kept there and you can sort of keep an eye on these systems and track how they're being managed and maintained. You get a full device list. All recent reports, so 5839 certificates, for example, or any other kind of reporting that you use can be stored within CLSS. And all upcoming or ongoing inspections you can see at a quick glance as well. So for device lists, this is in a bit more detail. On the dashboard, you can see all of those devices that are connected to that panel or CLSS across your sites. You can see what they are broken down now as well. And you can see if you go into your customers, into your sites, and into your buildings, you can start to drill into this information. Now for the eagle-eye view, all of the addressable stuff. So addressable is anything connected to your panels. What you can see underneath that is the blue stuff, which is non-addressable. So you can think a little more holistically in fire now. So what about your fire extinguishers? What about your fire doors, emergency lighting? Often is the case in areas where there's general public or a high footfall of people. If it isn't nailed down, it can do with asset tagging. So if there's room for a barcode, if there's room for a QR code on your extinguishers, on your emergency lighting, fire doors, get them attached. And if we can, using CLSS and self-test, improve efficiencies and improve that way that your sites are being managed and maintained, we have a bit more time. We can potentially do some asset tagging and record that information too. So inspections. What we're essentially trying to show you here is giving you this higher level of visibility and maximum compliance. So we can give you progress on your sites. You can see what's happening as they go. You can see percentages across buildings of how far through inspections we are, and at a glance, really. You can see anything that's been passed, failed, skipped, and untested. And I might go into it in a bit more detail down the line, but what's important is to tell you that as an engineer, often is the case, it's not about proving somebody hasn't done something. It might be a case of proving why something hasn't happened. You don't currently have that information, and if you did, it would be a better thing. So engineers can now add corrective actions on there, so you get this real-time, up-to-date information. Okay, right, this is what's going to happen. So there's less hidden costs, less hidden nasties and stuff that you weren't quite aware of until it's a little too late. We can add images to the area, building changes, device conditions, all this stuff. So you've got this visual representation now of exactly what an engineer was looking at when they were unable to carry something out. Again, it just improves that communication, so you're much more aware of what was happening, and it's a sort of a situation where don't just take my word for it. So, and lastly, everything can be exported. If it exists in CLSS, it's either in a customized report that we've created, or you can export it and use it as you need to. So meeting the maintenance standards, quite tricky. There's often fairly sort of similar obstacles, and I don't think a lot of this is going to be of a great shock to you, but across your sites, access must be a really sort of a difficult thing. What about the locations? Operating theatre seems to be an obvious one. The schedules of those can change at the drop of a hat, and you can't very well have somebody coming in and carrying out the maintenance or inspections of life safety systems when somebody's life's at stake. What about permits? Very valuable, very useful and needed always, but they can often draw things out. And what about specialized equipment as well? So in quiet locations or hard to reach areas, getting that specialized kit in can often be very difficult and time consuming. And then things that are out of service, so think about lift shafts or whatever else it is that prevents engineers being able to access certain areas. And lastly, time. You know, these things take time, and what if time is taken away? The inspections still need to be carried out, and the standards still need to be met. So what we're aiming at doing now is either balancing those scales out a little bit, or if not, putting the favor onto the kit and the way that things are carried out, instead of trying our absolute best to just about hit those standards and just about meet the time requirements. So with CLSS and self-testing detectors, the idea is to give that time back. and complete what needs to be done and exceeding it often in a fraction of that time. So move over to self-test. Now, that was a bit of a skip there, but this is the inner workings of a self-testing device. So what you can see now is everything that makes up a self-testing detector. And it might look at a glance quite simple, but it really is quite revolutionary within the fire industry. If you think back to that slide I did at the beginning, where things have sort of remained somewhat sort of stagnant, I guess, for a period of time, we're offering this level of technology now where we can, from a command, from a mobile phone, we can initiate a functional test. When we hit that command using the CLSS app, it creates heat, and if you see in this the second image down, there's an orange cylinder that inside that is a wax element, and when that command is sent, that heats up. It proves the heat test. The heat creates smoke, and the smoke fills that chamber. And if you can see, there's a small fan there, and that fan then kicks the smoke out of the detector as well. So that proves the entire functional test. So we can guarantee these devices for up to 60 tests as well. So think about it, even if you lose 5 as a maximum 10 for commissioning, you still have 50 solid tests left to carry out. And at the minute, each of your devices are tested as a maximum once a year, but that meets the standard. Why not exceed the standard? So if your engineers are coming on site and they're testing, and we can do it in a fraction of a time, efficiently and effectively, functional test your entire buildings twice, 3, 4 times. They are using real smoke, and it's not software checked. So this is all real testing carried out. So what we can do, it takes no time at all in comparison to standard functional testing. We've got sort of videos and we've got some more stuff that would be great to follow up with, but we can test individual devices. We can test across loops, we can test across zones, and even across networks. So using Gent as an example, so some notifier through the Inspire panels are going to come out in September, and it's going to offer self-test, and they're going to be absolutely magnificent. But Gent, at the moment, we can test the largest sites within a time of about 34 minutes functionally. The idea is to flip the percentages and the times. Most of the time is spent on functional testing at the minute. What we want to do is switch that around and effectively functionally test everything in a fraction of the time, and spend more time visually inspecting, making sure everything's how it should be, and then fixing those corrective actions. So the greatest thing, in my opinion, is self-testing devices can potentially offer far more safer testing than ever. So you may or may not be aware that when an engineer comes on site, they will disable something, be that a device, a loop, a zone, a panel, a floor, even a building can be disabled in order to carry out that functional test. Self-testing devices don't do that. You put it in a specific mode on the panel, and when that's in that mode is enacted and the self-test takes place, it essentially borrows that device off that loop, tests it for less than a minute, and puts it back again. So your systems remain up. They are working all the time. The testing is carried out, so it's safer, and there's no chance of systems being left disabled, for example. And if there is an actual live event, the system will detect that and put the system back into its default setting as well. So it's borrowing that device, putting it back again, and it's remaining in that sort of that ready function throughout. So I think that's a really impressive thing, especially considering some of the locations that you work in. And then the visual inspection. So there's 2 main parts to any test. There's the functional test and then the visual inspection as well. So with self-testing devices, each device has a Bluetooth low energy transmitter, so a BLE detector. And cleverly, it verifies, CLSS and self-test verifies the engineer's been within the visual inspection range, which is 10 meters. Okay, so it shows the device. If you can look on the right hand side, this is something that we refer to as a device card. So that's a representation on the app of the system that the engineer is working on. So you can see the dark blue bar there. That's the device that's within the Bluetooth range. If an engineer carries out a visual inspection outside of that Bluetooth range, it will reflect on all of the reporting that's inside CLSS. So you will know that the visual inspection potentially, not absolutely, but potentially has been carried out ineffectively. Okay, so it's all about compliance and it's all about efficiency. So you can see absolutely what's going on, but this is just such a smarter way of doing things. So this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but what I want to take a look at these images now. What I really want you to do now is think specifically about the type of issues that occur across your buildings, your sites, your trusts, and think of those hard-to-reach areas: lift shafts, difficult voids, operating theatres, low immunity wards, mental health wards or facilities. The list can go on. Consider the potential for CLSS and self-test. I mean, even me not booking this room I'm sat in this morning could potentially have an impact on maintenance and compliance accuracy, because an engineer that's scheduled to come in and carry out the inspection on this room now can't, because I'm sat here talking to you. How many times does that sort of thing happen on your sites? How do you know? You may or may not, but if we have something like CLSS, it proves it absolutely. An engineer can't enter a room that's occupied. How many times are there temporary environmental changes on site? Rooms potentially used as storage that shouldn't be. Access to those sensitive locations or wards might not be given. Permits. How often do gaining permits or permissions prevent access, or at least draw out a situation? The right people need to be in the right place, etc. It's not an easy thing. So being able to functionally test every device on site quickly and efficiently, whilst causing the minimal amount of disruption, really importantly, and most importantly, I guess, to patients, whilst absolutely proving compliance, absolutely can only be a good thing. Being able to increase efficiency of functional testing massively, whilst proving indisputably that the test has taken place, hopefully will provide a peace of mind, allowing engineers the tools to be able to either prove that they have done something, or very importantly, prove why something hasn't happened the way it should. Because let's face it, things never go according to plan. It's hopefully going to improve relationships, trust, integrity, give you a peace of mind that your sites are going to be managed and maintained by those best third-party certified companies, and using the best kit and tools available to them. So I guess all that's left to say is thank you very much for listening. There's a bit more information down there on a link when the slide's going to be shared with you guys, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, and if there aren't, then thank you very much for listening.
Hi Tom, thank you. That's a very interesting presentation. We have had one or two questions, as we usually do. How often and how regularly have trusts generally clearly identified the responsible and competent persons on fire safety testing? Is this presumably in the wake of Grenfell, etc., and all the added onus and on fire safety? This is something they do.
Well, I think that the sort of post-Grenfell era, there's been an awful lot of changes and sort of eyes wide open. BS 8644 is a standard that existed, I believe. Don't quote me on this, but it was sort of 2006 or something like that. But the Part 1 existed post-Grenfell. So sort of understanding what happened and why has become very, very important. And you know, reasons for CLSS and self-test aren't just about compliance, but the golden thread has appeared post-Grenfell, and sort of audit trails of who's done what, where, and when have become more important. I think it's if you can have the opportunity to use tools like this that might make your life a whole lot easier and prove that things are being done, and improve relationships along the way, can only be a good thing. But it's hard to really say. But a lot has changed post-Grenfell.
Thank you. Somebody else has asked, I mean, how time consuming without a system like this, where there's lots of manual testing of call points, could it be for the people in the estates and facilities team to have to carry out these tests on a large acute hospital site with lots of different buildings?
That's an extremely good question. I wish I could answer it really directly and accurately, but it really is how long's a piece of string. Where we can, so use my building here for an example. It might take an engineer, I think, hours, 10, 12 hours to carry out the functional testing in this building. Using self-test, the functional testing's done inside sort of less than 30 minutes. The whole thing, functional and visual, in a couple of hours, whereby that would take sort of 10 to 12 hours. So it depends what's going on in your sites. Those operating theatres, those hard to reach areas, those voids that nobody can ever get into, they're the areas that that are going to take up an awful lot of that time. And if you can know absolutely just by the press of a button that they're functionally tested and they're working the way they should, if the devices are masked, self-test will tell you. That's so it depends. We'd have to look at those on a case-by-case basis, but time savings are a very, very good certainty.
I mean, similarly, obviously cost is an implication for trusts. I mean, how is a system like this normally financed by, say, an NHS trust? What are the options?
Well, unfortunately, as a manufacturer, we have a very we have a relationship with key partners, and that would have to be something that you would have to raise with those guys. I would expect my message that I'd like to give about self-test is it's going to fundamentally change the way that sites are managed and maintained. So there will be cost differences, but they need to be understood and planned out. But this is unfortunately something that I can't give specifics on, owing to the relationships that we have with our partners.
Sure, no, I understand that. And in terms of the self-test technology that you have, are there many other competitor companies with anything akin to this, technologies like this, or would you think this is one of the most advanced such systems?
Self-testing devices by Honeywell are definitely the most advanced out there at the moment. From a compliance standpoint and from being very neutral and open, CLSS is a compliance tool. There are other compliance tools out there. Some offer a sort of a very wide sort of a width because they can access a lot of different panels. CLSS works really well with a group of panels managed by Honeywell that gives you that level of depth. So if you're looking at planning life cycle cost, health costs, you want to see those percentage point stuff, CLSS might be the tool for you, but you would need CLSS in order to manage self-test. But self-test is standalone. It's the only one out there that I am aware of that carries out the actual testing using physical smoke.
Thank you. There's some more sort of questions on the technical side. Another attendee's asked, although the cloud is seen as the new technology these days, what events can be stored at the panel or on the app if the infrastructure fails or is compromised, which obviously you hope it wouldn't be, but if there were that eventuality?
Well, I suppose it depends on how it's compromised, but what I would say is see CLSS, that gateway that connects to the panel, see that as a system enhancer. All that is doing is taking that information that's visible on that panel and moving it into an easier to read location. So you don't have to walk all the way over to the panel. You don't have to stab at the buttons to make, potentially mess it up, press the wrong buttons. They're really complicated things. This just draws that information out, populates it in a kind of a plain English way, and gives you that enhanced visibility. So you don't really need that. You just need to know that that information is being drawn from location A into location B to help you read it more effectively.
Thank you. Another question is, does a self-remote or remote test operate the cause and effect devices on the network, i.e. fire doors, lifts, ventilation, etc., as this is now a requirement of the HTMs and testing and witnessing are becoming joint activities?
So there are, use CLSS and self-test, there are lots of options for cause and effect testing on there as well. We have to take that on a case-by-case basis, as you can probably understand, but the strong likelihood is that all cause and effect testing can be managed through CLSS and self-test.
So thank you. Somebody else has a related question. Is there a way of integrating the data from the CLSS Honeywell dashboard into a pre-existing dashboard? And if so, what format does the data go to the cloud in? I don't know whether that's one.
No, what a good question. Basically, what we're trying to do here is we don't want people doing the same job twice. So there's going to be trusts out there that have maintenance sort of software, whatever that might well be. And some of that, what we have here is a bunch of information in your life safety stuff that you want to move over to location B. We have the capacity to offer sort of that. CLSS is currently about 4 years old. Well, it is 4 years old, and in current format, it's about 2 years old. We got a lot. It's a very powerful tool, and it's got amazing technology like self-test and some graphics packages and things like that that are coming out. But it's still an emerging technology. We are able to look again at those on a case-by-case basis, and if we can merge, sort of have that information crossing through, we'll try and work on that. But we'd need to know the specifics and see what we can do. But our intention is to make this as easy as possible. So if we can, we will.
Thank you. Somebody else has asked if they already have Honeywell fire systems across their estate, how do can they upgrade to self-test?
Another really good question. So it depends on the panel brand. So the two brands that of Honeywell systems that are going to have self-testing devices are Gent and Notifier. So with Gent, there's a sort of a backwards compatibility, so you can, depending on software, on a few factors, if you have grey doored panels, you're going to need to switch those and upgrade them. If not, we'd have to take a look at that with your system integrator to make sure, or your ESD, to make sure that we've got the right stuff there. But there is a possibility. So if you have S-Quad devices on Gent, you can switch those out and replace the head. And then we'd need to do some work on making sure we've got everything from an infrastructure perspective set up, but there is the potential. With Notifier, there is a new panel being launched in September called Inspire. That is a fantastic panel, and that is going to carry self-test for Notifier. So you would need to switch to Inspire panels for self-test. But they're the only two that we have it on.
Thank you. Another question is, after 60 tests, is the whole device replaced?
Well, think about this. So those, depending on the panel brand, the device will last between 10 and 14 years. So that's when the age of that device, we recommend as a manufacturer that you switch that device out, or it's good for 60 tests. So if you are looking for compliance plus, you're going to go for that more than 2 times 100% functional testing. It's still going to last, a good spell of years, 10, 12, 14 years, depending on what you do. So it would only be in line with what you're doing or should be doing anyway. If on the off chance that a device self-test functionality fails, it just becomes a normal device. So it's still going to carry out all of that requirement there as well. So it should last. It should stand the test of time.
Thank you. Another question is, why not solve these issues with hard to reach places with an aspirating smoke detection system instead? The HMI can be put in a maintainable position.
It's a great question. It really depends on the location though, doesn't it? It depends what's going on in that room. It depends on the environment. Sometimes aspirating is the right choice. Often is the case that self-test will be. Sometimes it might be a case of, and as I mentioned, some of these sites are very large and complicated, complex, very old sites. So there might be a requirement for both. So it really depends on the site and the location.
I think you've alluded to this, but somebody else has asked, what is the life cycle on a self-test device compared to a standard detector?
Okay, same, 10 to 14 years. So depending on the brand, depending on what exactly it is, you're looking at between 10 and 14 years. But
Thank
that's the
you.
same as the devices that you currently have from Honeywell anyway at the moment.
Another question, how straightforward is it to retrofit self-testing devices into an existing system with controls such as HELVAR? And can emergency lighting also use the same Honeywell dashboard type system?
So emergency lighting would only be managed using the non-connected assets. So if you barcoded it, if you QR coded that emergency lighting, we'd be able to manage the maintenance of it, but it wouldn't work in the same way. What was the first part of the question again? Sorry.
Bear with me for 2 seconds. It was, how straightforward is it to retrofit self-testing devices into an existing system with controls such as HELVAR, H-E-L-V-A-R?
What I would recommend is, what I would suggest is, well, it really depends. It can be straightforward, but we would need to look at that in more detail, I would probably say. And it's something I'd quite like to follow up, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
if
course.
there's some specifics that we can offer some guidance on, then we will. But that sounds like something we need to have probably more of a detailed conversation about.
No, that makes sense. Another question is, with sites, another technical question, with sites that have a control room, is the software open architecture to allow for IDS, FDS, CCTV, etc., to be integrated for use with the self-test functions?
Well, it's not a VMS system. So it's a life safety system, and it's an enhancer of a system for your life safety information. So the CCTV and all that sort of stuff, it's not for that, at least currently. So I would say that it would sit alongside all of that.
Thank you. Another attendee's asked, is there any backup on record information in gate panels available to download in case the network and iCloud are down? Is that one that you can answer?
Yeah, well, I have worked specifically on CLSS for over 2 years now, and I have known this to not go down, but pause probably a handful of times. It's very, very strong and reliable. This is the backup. I've seen it before where information, in its more fledgling stages, where some information got moved from one location to another and we retrieved it right back. This is an audit trail of everything that happens on your life safety system. This is the backup. You can access this because it's just license driven. You can access it on your phone. If you have 10 laptops, you could access it, shut it down there and open it on this one and this one. So this is where you go. If that panel falls off the wall, this still functions. It's still got all of this stuff, this information visible.
Thank you. Another question is, are there ATEX rated devices for specific areas?
Again, something I'd like to follow up afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, absolutely. Somebody else has asked, what cybersecurity measures have been put in place to ensure CLSS can be used in secure locations?
No, it's an extremely good question. So with CLSS, we've taken a lot of time, because our customers expect and demand it, to make sure that this is as strong as possible. We have a white paper that's created that can provide all of the information that you're going to need, that should answer all of your cybersecurity questions and queries. What I would say is all the information is housed on Microsoft Azure, which is very powerful in its own right. On top of that sits something called Honeywell Forge, which is its own entity, which is extremely powerful. And you can appreciate Honeywell kit gets into a lot of locations, and a lot of them are areas that are not accessible. So it needed to be very strong. So we've got this white paper that should answer a lot of questions. And if it's something that people need, reach out.
Thank you. I'm sure attendees will do. Somebody else has asked, are there any limitations as to how many self-tests a detector can do?
Well, we guarantee it for 60 tests. I mean, I have a couple of demo boards that have done significantly more than that, but we test our devices to the weakest components, and we sort of say that right now, at least, that 60 tests is sort of a good safe number to rely on.
Thanks, Tom. I think that has covered all the questions we've had from attendees. I'm sure if others have questions, they can and will get in touch with you. Just to say, this recording audio video of this presentation will be made available afterwards. And to thank Tom Ford very much for a very interesting presentation on a fascinating area of fire safety technology. Also, thanks to all those who've attended, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you.
Goodbye to all. Thank you.